Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of the Book Blab. My name is Amy, and I blog at Sunlit Pages, and I'm here with my co-host Suzanne, who blogs
Hi.
about such stuff. So, and we're here for another discussion about another bookish topic. But first, it's been a few months since we last chatted, and it's summer, and you're off of school, Suzanne. So, how's your summer been going? I know you guys had a really fantastic trip
We
that I'm so
did.
jealous of.
We had a dream trip to England to celebrate our 10th anniversary, and that was the big thing of the summer. It's been pretty quiet since then. Just sort of hanging out around here and loving being off school and being with my kids and whatnot. But you guys have been pretty busy.
Yeah, our July has been really busy because we also took a trip, not to England. That would have been a dream, but we just did a little road trip and had a lot of family reunions. So between those two things, we've had a lot going on, and it's finally calming down, I think, until school starts. So that's going to be nice. I like fun things, but I also just love being at home with my routine.
Yes. Yes,
So
exactly.
that's where we're at right now. Back to the routine until the end. So last time when we chatted, we talked about book clubs and how to start a book club, what makes a good book club, and just shared some of the different kinds of book clubs that we've been in. But during that episode, we didn't get a chance to actually talk about the books that you might read at book club.
Which is kind of one of the most important parts, right?
Right. So we kind of saved that so that we could just give it its own episode and its own time. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is good book club books, bad book club books, and what you should know in order to choose a book that will actually produce a good discussion. So let's just generally talk first about what makes a good book club book. Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, so the thing that's interesting, and it's taken a lot of, like book club experience to really figure this out. Yeah. The thing that's interesting about book club book picks is that like favorite books don't necessarily equal good book club books.
Exactly.
There can be a book that I just love and it's perfect and it's darling and it's adorable, or it's just so wonderful in so many different ways. And you suggest it for book club and you read it and then you get there and everyone's like, yes, it was wonderful. And that's sort of all there is to say about it.
Right.
Is that it's like, I loved that book so much. And so we spend 5 minutes all fangirling over the book. And then there's like nothing else to say about it because there's nothing to hate about it, or there's nothing like no depth to discuss. So anyway, that is something that I've had to learn, that just because it's a favorite book, just because it's a really good book, doesn't mean it's a great book club book, which is
right. I totally agree with you. And as I was getting ready for this video and this discussion, I was thinking back to some of my favorite book club books, and it's so interesting because some of my favorites have been books that I hated.
Isn't that so interesting?
It just led to such a good discussion. And I think really good book club books will often be kind of polarizing. You know, some people will love it, some people will hate it, or just maybe even those feelings within yourself. So I was actually thinking about two in particular. One was State of Wonder by Anne Patchett.
Yes.
I don't know if you've read that one.
I've heard about it. I haven't read it.
It has kind of a controversial ending. And personally, I hated the ending, and it made me hate the entire book, even though I didn't hate the book while I was reading it. It wasn't until I got to the last 5 pages that I hated it. Like literally thought it was one of the worst books I'd ever read. So, so that was a fascinating discussion, you know, because people had very different opinions, and some people didn't mind the ending at all. And So that was good. And I was
Mm-hmm.
really glad I'd read it because it was such a good book club discussion. And then another one that we read fairly recently was called The Children Act by Ian McEwan. I think that's the author's name. But it was about a boy who needed a blood transfusion, but his family was Jehovah's Witness, and they don't believe in blood transfusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had been, there was a whole court case about it. I mean, it's a fictionalized story, but there was a court case, and it was kind of the judge deciding, like, is he going to be forced to get this life-saving blood transfusion, or are we going to let him, because he was underage, you know, so are we going to let his parents make this decision, or are we going to let the doctors make this decision? And because of that, and because religion was such a big part of this, and the people in my book club are fairly religious, and so it led to a really amazing discussion. But if I'd read the book on my own, I think I just wouldn't have liked it. Yeah, but having people to discuss it with made it so much better. So, yeah.
So polarizing topics or books that people have really different opinions on. Another one, or another category of book that I've found that's pretty good, is when it's ambiguous. And by that I mean, like, when the author is not like necessarily purposely leaving, not that there's plot holes or not that there's things like that, but just that there's ambiguity in how you can interpret what's going on. And those kinds of books, they make for great classics. They can also make for really frustrating reads because you're like, I don't understand what's going on here. But they can also make for really, really great discussions to hear other people talking about, well, what do you think? What do you think happened? What do you think was going on? And a book I read, I haven't read this one for a book club because of its length, which we're going to talk about in a second, because length is a consideration. But the one that I think of when I think of, are like this really good sort of ambiguous, what is going on exactly? Who can say what's going on exactly? What is the author trying to say? Is A Prayer for Owen Meany by what's his name? John Irving. Yeah, I think that's his name. Anyway, that is a book where I liked it, but more it was just like, so what was happening in that book? And what exactly was the author trying to say? And I really wanted someone to talk to about it. And my sister-in-law read it at the time, so we chatted about it. It was just one of those books where it was like really, really interesting and intriguing, and I needed to figure it out by talking it through with someone.
Yes. Well, and I was actually thinking, you know, one of the really great ways to pick a book club book is to think back to the books that when you finished it, you were like, I need to talk to someone about this book. I have to find someone. That is an excellent indicator if it's going to be a good book club book. If you just close the book and you're just like, oh, that was so nice, the end, you know, that's probably not a great book club book. But if you close it and you're like, I have to find someone right now and see what they thought about this, then I think you've got a good book club book.
So the book I have to bring up here that falls under this category is Educated by Tara Westover. Because
I've not read yet, but I know that is going on the list for my book club next year for sure.
Yes, and my book club here in Kansas City just read it, and it was our best book club discussion ever, because everyone had such strong emotional reactions to that book. But yes, it was one of those books when I finished it, I was like, and what's funny about it is that usually I tell people about books because I recommend them, right? I'll be like, this book is so good, you have to read it. I highly recommend it. You should read it. But for Educated, I'm like, I don't know if I recommend it. I don't know if I do, but I need you to read it so that I can talk to you about it. I just need people to talk to about this book. And it made for a fabulous book club because yes, there was such strong reactions to it and such differing opinions. And there was so much to say about it. So yeah, that was a good one for that.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, you briefly mentioned, the length of a book can be a good, just a good decision or a decision maker, you know, as far as like, should we choose this for book club or not? Because that can really be a big turnoff to people, especially depending on your type of book club. You know, if it's more of a casual book club, then you're not going to want to choose
Moby Dick.
Yes, Moby Dick, or I'm trying to think of
War and
a really long one,
or
Anna Karenina or something. Yeah.
So it depends on how frequently you meet, and it depends on who's in the book club. But I've got to say, you know, like I'm a voracious reader type, but I don't even want to be tackling massive books every single month.
I agree.
For book club, right? So yeah, keeping all of that in mind. If your book club meets every few months and you like decide as a group that you want to tackle a longer book, then that's great. Yeah, it's really great.
So, and I think two things have helped. Well, not two things. One thing has helped in our book club, and that is that we decide on the books, you know, well in advance.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And in that case, we'll often say, like, make a note, like, this is a really long book. So if you finish the book, you know, for the previous month early, you might want to get a head start on this, or even several months head start. In fact, this is just in my neighborhood book club, not my really serious book club, but in my neighborhood book club for this coming month, we read America's First Daughter. Have you read that one?
I haven't.
It was so good. So I highly recommend it. I'm really excited about our book club discussion, but I think it was over 600 pages. I listened to it, and I know it was over 20 hours of listening. So that's a little bit more of a commitment. In the case of that book, it wasn't like a heavy classic that might be a little bit harder to get into. It was really easy to get into. It was just really long, so you just couldn't put it off until a couple days before book club and then cram. At least most people probably couldn't do that. But what I was going to say is that we decided on that book several months ago. I want to say like maybe back in March, and so people knew that it was going to be a long one, and just get started whenever you can and slowly tackle it.
So a related but different category of that is when your group club chooses bestsellers. Because so maybe you're part of a book club where everyone buys their books, and that's fine. But yeah, in all of my book clubs, everyone gets it from the library. So you have to be considerate of wait lists at the library, how long it's going to take people to actually get a copy of the book. And so for that reason, I actually don't love bestsellers.
I agree.
Yeah, especially if you're choosing on a month-by-month basis, because it makes it really hard for people to get a hold of it.
It does. And what happens is that some people are fine buying a book. One of my friends, you know, she often says, like, buying a book is just like a movie ticket or going out to dinner or whatever. So I just like kind of figure that into the cost. Like, I'm fine with buying it. But then other people who only want to get library books, or maybe they're like me and I'm fine buying a book, but I'm not fine buying a book that I won't love. And
exactly.
I know until I read it. So that can turn people off, and they just don't read it that month. And so yeah, that can make it a lot harder. So that's a really good consideration, is how popular is the book, and does the library have any copies? And I kind of have a funny story about this one, actually. This was not a bestseller, but the book that my book club read last month was called The Wolves at the Door. And it was about a World War II female spy. And, you know, we looked at it, like, we didn't look at it when we decided it, but as the months got closer, then we started looking for it at the library, and we're like, the library doesn't have any copies of this book. And I have cards at two major libraries that have like a very big network, and there were no copies. And I was like, this is so weird. But the Kindle edition was really cheap on Amazon, so I just bought it, and that's what most people did. And then we read it, and we were like, oh, this is why there are no copies at the library. This book is very poorly written. This is not a good book. And so that was kind of a failure. But we should have looked into it a little bit more before we actually decided on that book. And I think if the library has no copies, you know,
that's that's like the flip side of being a bestseller is that it's like not worth reading, or it's so niche that, you know, like nobody can find it, and that's a problem.
Exactly.
And actually, I think it was when we were in Chicago. I'm pretty sure it was, or maybe it was Provo. I don't remember. Where the library actually had book club sets, which I loved. Does your library have book club sets? Okay. I've not been to a library since that has them, but I think that's an awesome way to just make sure that books are available, and they're usually, because librarians know these things.
Yes.
Librarians know what are good book club books, and so book club sets are a great place to go to choose books.
I know, that's perfect. And lots of times those book club sets are some of the more recently popular books too. So maybe some of the best sellers, but they're just easier to get because you can just check out the one big package.
Right.
So yeah, that's good. And I also was just thinking, you know, you just kind of have to get a feel for what your book club will read, you know? Like the book club that I'm a part of right now is pretty serious. And so we do have 1 month where we read a classic and everyone reads it because that's just the way this book club is. Like you're just committed to it. But I've been in other book clubs where if a classic was chosen, literally 3 people would read it and the rest would just come and talk about pop culture or things like that, and totally derail the discussion. So I think that that's a really good thing to kind of identify up front, is what kind of book club are you a part of, and what kinds of books are the members looking to read. And if classics aren't up their alley, then don't force them into reading classics, because then just no one will read anything. So
and I've been part of book clubs that have leaned more heavily literary novels, fiction. But I've also been part of book clubs that have leaned more heavily to nonfiction and to information texts, which also make great book club books. You still have to be careful. Yeah. You still have to be careful about what you pick, but historical things or political books, or once again, anything with controversy or where people can have differing opinions, or even I was going to mention Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, just polarizing, right? Like some people are like, no, and other people are like, yes, me. So yeah, nonfiction can be a great way to go. And there's a lot of people out there who are more nonfiction prone, enjoy that more.
I think that there are some who maybe aren't really big readers, but nonfiction to them feels more useful or something, and so
or interesting, or
invest the time into it. Yeah, I actually think nonfiction, if you're wanting to play it safe, nonfiction is a great way to go for book club. So are we ready to talk about, just throw out some book recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, we've already been throwing out some.
We have, but I have a long list of other ones that I haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah. All right. We'll try to show some restraint here.
Yes, that's right.
But I'll start us off. Okay. So one I'm going to start with that falls into that nonfiction category. It's nonfiction. It's actually middle grade, which is sort of interesting. I think it's classified as middle grade. Anyway, it is Most Dangerous by.
Is it Steve?
Steve Sheinkin or something. Yeah, however you say his last name. Yeah, so he wrote Bomb, and I think Bomb is the more popular one, which is really good and excellent, and I love that too.
I've done that one for book club too, and it's worked.
Most Dangerous, there is so much room for controversy in that one. It's really, really interesting. And in fact, my mother-in-law read it, and we had sort of this little mini discussion, and it's about stuff that happened during the Vietnam War, which she lived through. So she talked about her perspective of living through it, and we talked about some of the correlations that he made to more current events that have gone on with, the war on terrorism and stuff like that. Anyway, so there was lots of room for discussion in that one. And it was really interesting. Anyway, so I think that would make a fabulous book club book.
Ooh, I haven't read that one. So yeah, you're making me want to pick it soon.
Yeah, it's good.
So I'm going to choose one, or I'm going to share one that is fiction, but that also got a lot of people kind of riled up and had very strong opinions. And that is The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman, I think.
And lots of room for.
Yes, there was. So it's fiction. It's about a couple who finds a baby, and they've always wanted a baby, and so they keep that baby without, reporting that they've found it or anything. And it was so interesting, the discussion that we had with that one, just because some people, the issue was very black and white for them. Like, of course they should have told someone that they had found a baby, no question. And then there were some of us, kind of me included, that I was like, oh, like I could just feel the heartache of this mother and just being like, we can give this baby a good home. And like, look, it looks like this baby was abandoned, why would we need to tell anyone? So it was just oh
man, that story, I have a hard time telling. Yeah. Like even thinking back on the story, I'm just like, oh,
I know.
It's hard.
It's a hard one, but
especially if you're a parent.
Really good book discussion because people are not going to see the same on that one at all. Yeah. They're going to have very different opinions about what the character should have done. So, and that's what you want. So,
all right. So another one. This is from a few years ago, and the publishing of this one was controversial.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Yes. So it's Ghost at a Watchman. By, how did I just blank on her name?
Harper.
Thank you. Yeah. So I don't know. Some people refuse to read it on principle. Some people refuse to read it because they'd heard that
it will ruin
Atticus or ruin To Kill a Mockingbird for them. I think that is the reason to read it in a book club, because yes, like things happen, and characters come out differently in this version. And I think I actually read it with a book club, and we did have a pretty interesting discussion about, where she took these characters and what was happening. And I think there was some real depth in there that a lot of people. Okay, so I think the overarching controversy of it being published in the first place, or what happened to Atticus, kind of took away from a lot of the other stuff that could have been discussed in it. Anyway, I think that one just had lots and lots of room and lots of polarizing opinions. So, yeah.
Well, and that brings up a good point, something that I was going to actually mention earlier, and that is that for me, book club often forces me to read books that I wouldn't read otherwise. And it's been awesome. It's usually really great because then you have someone to discuss it with. So in the case of Ghost at a Watchman, I have not read that because personally, I feel like I don't have much of an interest in it for the reasons you mentioned. Like I'm a little worried that, I just love To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't want the other side of the But if I had a book club to read it with, I would be all over that. Like if we ever decided on that for book club, I would totally want to do that, because then you would have someone to kind of process it with, and you could kind of compare and contrast with To Kill a Mockingbird, and I think it would be fascinating. So
definitely. And like I said, like not a favorite book, right? Ghost at a Watchman is not To Kill a Mockingbird. It is not a favorite book, but yes, as far as a book club book goes, it is so much to talk about.
So good. Yeah. Okay. I have another one that I read just this year. It's one of my favorite books I've read so far this year, and it was an awesome book discussion, and that is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, which is about the death penalty in America, and if we should have it or not, and some real hard cases that show just maybe why that's not one of our best choices.
That'd be
But
interesting.
it was such a good discussion, you know, because it really made us think, and it changed people's opinions too. So I think that was really good. And that's an example of a nonfiction book that just has brings up a lot of issues and gets people's emotions really going. And so they have a lot to say.
Yeah. Along that line, I actually didn't have this one written down, but is it called Half the Sky? I think it's called Half the Sky. Okay, that's one. It's about women, just women in the world, right? And all of the issues that women in the world face, and everything from, you know, like sex trafficking to female mutilation, genital mutilation, to maternity rates worldwide, to education issues worldwide. I mean, just lots of issues in that one. And so along the lines, it just made me, along the lines of, nonfiction books about hot, controversial topics of people not being aware or changing your mind about a stance or things like that. That was one that I did read with the book club that had a lot of really good discussion too, as far as how do you feel about this issue, or is this something that needs to be fixed, or but these people believe this, you know, do we have the right to change their beliefs, or anyway.
Interesting. Well, and going along with that, another one that maybe isn't even a current issue exactly, but a couple of books that I've read recently, Jefferson's Sons and the one I mentioned earlier, America's First Daughters, are both of America's First Daughter. They are both about Thomas Jefferson and talk a lot about his slave children. And so that's more of a historical hot topic, you know, like not necessarily even current, but just like, look at one of our founding fathers who wrote the Declaration of Independence and then had these slave children that he wouldn't actually acknowledge, and just things like that, like that can, and it is current, of course, because I feel like racial issues are always kind of
always a problem.
Yes, but that's looking at it more from a historical perspective, and it's really fascinating. So, yes, well, this has been. Did you have any others that you want? I mean, I have more. But
I mean, like, yes, so many that we could. So many. We'll just have to write a blog post list about it or something, right?
Corpse Part 3.
But hopefully that at least gives some ideas of good books to choose.
Yep. Ideas for actual books, and hopefully can kind of, maybe our discussion helped you think about some, you know, helped you remember some that you've read that have worked really well for you. And please share those with us in the comments. We'd love to hear books that have really worked for your book club also. So as if this episode hasn't already had enough recommendations, we're going to finish it off with our book recommendation segment, which is about great summer reads. And, you know, I think we might have done this same one last year, but I was like, you know what?
We just really love seasonal reading, so it's our thing.
So what did you choose?
All right, so what does it mean to be a summer read? It's the first question, because beach read is sort of a genre. Anyway, so I went with a book that is a summer read for me because it takes place in summer. And like the heat and the sweat is like this constant element that they're bringing up in the book. So it just feels like anyway, so I got to read it in the summer if you read it. So this book is The Truth According to Us by Annie Barrows, I think. It's Annie Barrows. Anyway, and I read this one just a few months ago, and I'm actually going to say that I just recommended it for my book club to read for this next month, and so we'll see if it actually makes a good book club book, but I think it will, just because I had issues with the ending, and I want to talk to other people about how it ended. Like, it has it's historical fiction. It takes place sort of during the Great Depression in a small southern town, I think in West Virginia, I'm trying to remember. And it's about this woman who works on the WPA writing project. And her job is to record the town history. And so she's interviewing all of these town people. And there was an event that happened in history, and she's trying to figure out the truth behind the event, and it affects the family that she's boarding with. Anyway, so Truth According to Us. So I would categorize it actually as slightly lighter and fluffier, which makes it a good summer read.
Yeah,
There's a bit of romance in it, but there's also some darker issues under it, and the ending. I feel like the ending, I need to talk to someone about it. So anyway, yeah, it's a good one. Kind of fluffy, but with some substance.
That sounds perfect. That sounds like a perfect summer read.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
So I also went with a book set during the summer because I just love that. I just love reading a book about summer in the summer,
right?
Or winter in the winter, or whatever the case may be. But it's so funny because the book that immediately came to my mind, but that I'm not recommending because I recommended it last year for our summer read, is The Penderwicks, which I just have one more plug for that because I just started it with my kids actually as a read aloud. And I was just reminded again, these are the perfect books for summer. They are just so good for summer. So that's not my recommendation this time, but I'm just
way to sneak in another one there.
Right. Well, I've already done it. I'm just giving an extra plug. But the one that I chose for this time, I think my kids and I actually read last summer, and it is Summer of the Monkeys.
I love that one so much.
Yes. Wilson Rawls, sorry. And we read this last summer, and I mean, if a book could be perfectly timed, like that was it last summer. I was just like, this book is made for summer. It's just, the setting and kind of the adventure aspect of it. And it's just a very poignant book too. I just cried at the end. In a happy way. So it's a good, happy book about a boy in the summer chasing monkeys. I mean,
my mom read that one to us when we were kids, and I have never forgotten it. That one it's a good one.
Yeah. So it's great as a read aloud, but if you don't have kids to read aloud to right now, it's good just to read. It's just a good book. So yeah.
All right. So we just want to thank everyone again for joining with us, for watching our show, for being with us this month. We just have so much fun doing this.
I know. It's so great.
I know. Another fun discussion. Of course, school's starting up again for everyone, so we'll see when our next one happens. I know. No idea. But
Christmas
yeah. Hopefully before then.
Yeah,
we'll see. But we just want to let you know, if you have any great book club book recommendations, like books that have gone over really well in your book clubs, we'd love to hear about those in the comments. Or also, if you have any topic suggestions for us for show ideas, we'd love to hear about that in the comments too. Yep. And we promise we will consider it and probably do a show about it. So yeah. And so who knows when we'll be back, but we'll be back sometime with another show.
Yep. We'll see you later.
See ya.